This contains spoilers from episode 7 of The Acolyte.
Calm yourself, Padawan. That's why I have a Padawan and you do not.
Because I'll take it home!
Master Indara.
Bitches come and go, bro. But you know I stay. Bitches come and go, bro.
I'm in.
Jedi Master Indara, played by Carrie Anne Moss, was teased as one of the major figures in the new Acolyte series, and showrunner Leslie Headland made a bold move by killing her off in her first scene of the series. The strongest scenes in the Acolyte are those that include the three characters Sol, Indara, and Chimera. Well, actually, all of the Jedi are pretty well portrayed and written. We get attached to Jeki and Yord before they're ripped away from us. Even Torben's wild actions make him more endearing than unlikable. Although I do worry that Dean Charles Chapman has become the Sean Bean of suicides. Although in The King and also in 1917, both pretty good films, he gets to go out like a man on the battlefield. Still dies though.
I said no!
You think you can get there in time?
Yes, sir.
At least the poor guy's getting work, right? You know, it takes just as much skill to portray a weenie as it does a hero on screen. Although the fanfare and adoration you get for such roles is considerably less. But anyway, it seems like the last Jedi we actually get to know in the series, Jedi Master Indara, is the most trustworthy and balanced of all of the Jedi. She is what you would call the classic archetype of what we perceive the Jedi as, especially during the original trilogy period. One of the complaints I've seen for the show is how the Jedi are treated and viewed as an imperfect organization in the Acolyte. A lot of people blame Disney for this, but, you know, evil corporations are easy targets, and honestly, the truth will set you free. It's actually George Lucas who made this change more than a quarter century ago with the prequel era, when he decided to show the Jedi Order as an institution at the peak of their power before the fall. As grainy film gave way to high definition, as sets and on-location shots were replaced by green screens and CGI, the mystery of these brown-robed monks was dissipated when we saw them as members of an organization, as generals in the military, as peacekeepers and diplomats. And the Force also was grounded by elements like the midichlorians. And in our nostalgia, we forget how much the prequels were hated.
You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized, and people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. You know, it's not much fun, and you can't experiment. You can't do anything. You have to do it a certain way.
A lot of people think that Disney destroyed George Lucas's Star Wars. The reality is Disney was just an opportunist. They were looking for cheap assets and IPs to buy. What really destroyed George Lucas's Star Wars was the fans. They destroyed his love for making these type of mainstream movies. I mean, that much is very evident to me. And I worry that the same thing is happening now. Yes, Disney has really made some poor choices. They've made some bad movies here and there. But the level of hatred and vitriol amongst the fans, the just childish and kind of hateful behavior in this fandom is honestly shocking. Perhaps it's driven out of love of the content. I understand that to a certain degree, but we all know that like love is a deep emotion, and if you really love Star Wars, you know that it can lead to fear and hate, and that's the dark side. I mean, it's written there, guys. It's part of the canon. And when the prequels came out, just like now, there were valid criticism, constructive criticism that were kind of drowned out by the more, you know, hateful comments that sought to attack individual actors, individual creators. There were death threats against Ahmed Best. I mean, Jake Lloyd was bullied to the point where he just quit acting. Hayden Christensen's, his entire career was also destroyed. I mean,
if we don't meditate on the past,
we're doomed to repeat it.
The real problem with the original trilogy to prequel trilogy transition was that unfortunately sometimes it's better not to know our heroes too intimately. Perhaps the most based critics of Star Wars who are free of glitter and stardust from their eyes are the OG fans who believe that Star Wars should have ended with just one film. Every piece of lore explained, every question answered, every background character explored cheapened the magic and mystery of this world. The original Star Wars was really about themes and myths explained rather than exposition and background information. At its purest, Star Wars was supposed to be a retelling of the hero's journey, just as Joseph Campbell wanted. Jedi Master Indara is perhaps the only individual in the Acolyte who is emotionally, spiritually, and physically stoic enough to be considered a universally good character. My first impression of her as a cold and arrogant Jedi was wrong. You know, the truth is, characters who like to follow the Jedi Code to the T are kind of boring. It's the renegades that have always drawn my attention, individuals like Qui-Gon Jinn, who I find far less insufferable and much more enjoyable to watch. He's someone I'd like to hang out with in real life. Not Master Indara, unfortunately. But after episode 7, where we witness how the disastrous events of the Brendok incident actually unfold, I have to say there are merits to the Jedi training system. In the confines of the Jedi Temple, the teachings of the Jedi, the complete adherence to controlling one's emotions, can seem cruel and overbearing, especially when it's directed to children like Anakin and like Osha and Jeki. But that is perhaps more a criticism of the Jedi's practice of trying to mold children into the shapes they need them to be, instead of just realizing that no amount of nurture can overcome some children's nature. And that perhaps certain people are born with a personality that is just naturally volatile and does not fit the rigid code of the Jedi. And therefore these children will always remain a liability for the Order and most likely require a different type of training. But when we see the Jedi out in Brendok as a survey team, far away from the Jedi Temple, far away from any civilization or other law enforcement organization, or even just basic infrastructure, the Jedi Code seems to be the thin line in between even-handed law enforcement and frontier justice. And Master Indara, well, she is like a sea of tranquility. Her calmness allows her to act like almost a seismograph in basically detecting the emotions of her colleagues who are, a little bit less experienced than her and more volatile. Like that time where she senses Kelnaka's frustration that her young Padawan is basically insulting his cooking. Which is quite dangerous. Wookiees tend to rip people's arms off for these kind of things. By the way, they were eating Nuna, otherwise known as the majestic swamp turkey. And while not as delicious, tender, and juicy as porgs or Ewok cheeks, with the right marination, and that really is the key, you can go way beyond just making like a club sandwich with that meat. To all my fellow Americans who just like to season their meat before cooking it, you're really just tackling the problem of a lack of flavor at the surface level. You're only going skin deep. If you really want to solve the problem of flavor, you have to get in deeper to the foundation of the meat. You have to marinate. And, I once went to a Chinese Thanksgiving, and the guy cooking the turkey, he actually marinated it with hoisin sauce. And guys, wow. Cultural trauma passed down through the generations because frequent famines really does wonders for your cuisine. In America, our meat tends to be pretty high quality. We have a lot of it, and I feel like that breeds a certain amount of laziness with how we cook and a lack of creativity in our cuisine. Try turning a shoe and bark into a meal, and that's when you've really learned how to become a cook. Pretty hungry again. But my point here is, guys, if you put a little bit more effort into your food, create meals and not just rations for the men, it will create a warmth in their stomach that will travel up to their hearts and give them courage, steel them against the horrors of the Outer Rim. It probably would have also prevented Torben from kicking off like an intergalactic Waco-like incident for the Jedi. But anyways, Indara also seems to be the only one who truly understands Master Sol, who I admit up till now I thought was showing signs of being, the Qui-Gon Jinn of this period. Jung Jae even admitted that he was taking cues from the patron saint of trafficked children himself, Liam Taken Neeson. And I know some of you guys are disappointed at the turns of events with Master Sol that started in episode 6 and kind of went downhill in episode 7, which has completely painted him in a very different light. But this is what the Acolyte is about, the duality of man. Sol is a sensitive person, and his compassion is a shield he wields to not only protect himself from the cruelties of the world, but also to hide his more selfish desires and lack of control. Something only Indara seems to be able to see.
My Padawan is too distracted to appreciate the significance of emergence. Nor are we sure that it's the cause of life on Brendok.
He was disturbed. Unbalanced.
Indara and Sol are probably similar in age, and it's very clear why one is a master and one is a Jedi Knight.
You were disturbed. Do not confuse Torben's feelings with your own. I do not tell him answers to ease his mind. I teach him to seek the answers for himself.
She's not afraid to call out her colleagues, and, her criticisms of Sol seem to ring true to him. He doesn't try to fight back here, he just accepts the criticism. To his credit, he seems to actually be working on this aspect of himself, but, although he catches himself here and there, by nature, he's just too emotional, too quick to jump to conclusions, too eager to do his job as well, and thus he doesn't often think clearly about the consequences of his actions. When he breaks into the Witch Coven, he gathers an incomplete picture of what's going on. Instead of thinking about his duty as a Jedi, he lets his emotions dictate what is most important for him, and his heart goes directly towards the welfare of the children. I mean, we've all seen people like this who are, driven by this righteous indignation that what they're doing is right and everyone who tries to stop them is clearly evil or wrong.
They do not treat the girls like children.
We should return to the ship, ask the Council for guidance.
I fear for the girls' safety. The witches prepare for a ceremony tonight. What if the girls are in danger?
You gotta give it to Sol here. This is a compelling argument, and Sol's urgency is infectious. I think it affects Indara. I almost called her Trinity. But the picture he's painting for Indara is unreliable, because he is biased. But Indara, despite all of her control and calmness, still has a heart. She's compassionate, as a Jedi should be, and the danger Sol's reporting on here, whether it's real or not, warrants at least an investigation. If lives are at stake in this moment, it is her obligation to try and help. This is more about the Jedi Code than jurisdictional issues here. Now notice, when the Jedi arrive at the fortress, Indara tells the rest of her team to wait behind her.
It's too risky to go in as a group. They'll take it as a threat.
Her intuition here is correct. The witches are afraid of the Jedi somewhat and distrustful. And so it shows us that at least one Jedi during this period of time, Indara, has some self-awareness over how the Jedi are perceived by outside forces, especially by what could be a hostile Force cult. More importantly, Indara also keys in on the fact that there are 50 women and 2 children. I think he's trying to play down how dangerous these individuals are, but at the same time, I mean, she has 2 kind of volatile Jedi and a Wookiee. This is an all-female cult. There might be a reason why there are no men here. They might hate men. And so bringing men with you is going to be a problem. I think she's being pretty rational by connecting these things together. And I think also equally as important, she's probably worried about how much control she can assert over her own team, which is quickly falling apart at the seams.
There are over 50 of them.
50 women. And only 2 children.
It's clear that while Sol and Torben are distrustful of the witches and perhaps even fear them, Indara clearly does not fear them, and that matters in this situation. These witches are Force sensitive and can sense discomfort of the Jedi, which will only add more fuel to the fire. Metaphorical fire. That scene happens later. Now, when they return back, Indara must soothe Sol's mind because he's really worried, and for every fear he brings up, Indara calmly counters him.
I feel a connection to Osha.
Sol, testing the twins is not something we can take seriously. Osha's too old to join the Order.
I feel she's meant to be my Padawan.
Her coven will never let her leave.
They mocked her sister with dark magic.
Ceremonial markings are customary in many cultures in the galaxy.
I worry she's not safe.
That's true. She may have resisted being marked. There's no way to know.
What endears me to Indara is the way she talks to her colleagues. She's not a disciplinarian. She's not trying to enforce rules. She's actually being quite empathetic to Sol. Despite the fact that he's clearly emotional and a bit out of control, she takes him seriously at his word, and I think that does help calm him down. And she addresses everything he says one at a time with a rational point of view. She needs Sol to understand that it doesn't really matter if he perceives that the witches are a danger or not, because for them to carry out an operation like this, they have to cross so many lines, face so many unknowns. They just don't have enough information at this point, and the Jedi actually have a code and guidelines for dealing with these types of situations. And he needs to rein back his emotions to a certain degree. And she really doesn't call him out until he kind of oversteps.
I believe she wants to live with us.
Do not confuse what Osha wants with what you want.
And later, when he uses the Jedi Force sensitivity test as his last hope to perhaps bring Osha into the Order, Indara continues to treat this moment pretty rationally. Although she knows that May and Osha probably will never join the Jedi Order, she uses this moment to try to interrogate May about what exactly the witches are doing.
Everyone must walk through fear. Everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny.
I'm starting to believe that Leslie Headland is purposely writing these lines to make what the witches are doing seem ambiguous, because, again, that's not what matters here. It actually doesn't matter if the witches are doing something completely messed up or not. I mean, look at all the signals they're sending. The witches have real maternal love for the children, but at the same time, you can't unshake the feeling that something awful is about to happen. Like, what is that hole? It looks terrifying. It reminds me of the one on Knock 2. It also kind of reminds me of the one in Buffalo Bob's house.
Hey, Auto Trader! Ooh, August, I don't got this one. Oh, there's some deals in here. Oh, check this out, 71 CUDA, plum crazy purple.
I think what Headland is trying to recreate is just like what law enforcement usually runs into in the field. Like, oftentimes it's very difficult for, people to judge outright whether a situation involves criminals or just innocent people. And I think, like, going into a situation using your preconceived notions, emotions, stereotypes, that's a dangerous thing for a police officer to do. This whole show is about procedure. It's about respecting the power that you're given and treating it as something that is, very dangerous and something that you need to follow proper procedure to deal with. But the whole point is we just don't know. And just like in real law enforcement situations, when you see a very shady situation, you can't just use your intuition, your preconceived notions, stereotypes that you have in your head to enforce the law, because you have a monopoly on power. You're the police. This is almost like a training video for police officers about how they should approach situations and how they should always try to rely on their training as much as possible, because there are so many unknown factors when trying to enforce the law. And Indara, who has the burden of command specifically, has to remain clear-headed, just like Mother Anastasia. Because not only do they have to make the right decisions themselves, they have to protect and watch over the people underneath their charge. And so when Indara sees Sol coaching Osha through her test, she's visibly upset by this. But the fact that she doesn't intervene immediately, well, that is the human side of Indara showing again. The compassion that she has for this child, for her desire to be a Jedi, and the respect she has for Sol. And that perhaps is her own weakness here. Sol's behavior is growing increasingly erratic. I mean, I think he's being erratic enough for Indara to report him back to the council, but she clearly also believes that she has the situation under control, and while her focus is on Sol, she fails to pay enough attention to her own Padawan Torben, who is growing increasingly angsty, and most likely is still underneath the influence of the witch's thread. Indara ultimately makes the right choice by talking to the council and deferring to their judgment. And they tell her that not only are these children not to be trained, they also warn Indara that they've already overstepped their boundaries in this situation. The Jedi Order have most likely factored in the jurisdiction problems with this whole scenario, right? This is supposed to be a survey mission on a world outside of Republic space. They can survey, but they can't enforce the law in an area where they're not peacekeepers. And even if the witches seem dangerous, it's not their responsibility to handle this. They're a survey team. You know, if the witches prove to actually be dangerous, ideally the Senate will approve the Jedi, or maybe, you know, some kind of Republic Defense Force unit to go to this area and actually take care of the situation. Maybe you have negotiation teams, diplomats who can talk to these witches. You know, for all the hate that Star Wars throws at bureaucracy, sometimes it's needed. You need more eyes on a situation so that cooler heads can prevail. I mean, sometimes you just need to wait out situations and allow them to solve themselves. And so ultimately, Indara's biggest mistake here was not perceiving her own Padawan's, I guess, internal crisis, right? This is what causes the entire Brendok incident, ultimately. You know, overall, Indara was an individual who tried her best to keep things from spilling out of control. The Jedi counterparts of Mother Anastasia, as we mentioned before. You know, individuals like these two keep the world from tearing itself apart into chaos and conflict. But as you can see, despite the best intentions of these leaders, you know, humans are emotional creatures. We're driven by fear, by things that we don't know. And a lot of times we can act very irrationally. And this is why, you know, there needs to be a certain type of structure in society, I think. And, you know, the Jedi Code in this situation really proves itself to be, you know, quite useful. You probably would have never imagined hearing me say that, but, you know, I'm always learning, right? I'm always open to new ideas if they're presented in the right way. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.